4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, Addison, and welcome to the Make Life Rich Movement podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Everyone, we are speaking with Addison LaBonte. You are the founder of Sweet Addison's, and you also have a really popular blog, Organically Addison. A shocking diagnosis at a super young age led you to what seems like a complete 180 in your life and subsequently your career, and seems very meant to be. And when I came across your business and your journey and kind of your story, I was immediately wanting to speak with you. I just love so much that you kind of didn't take a health diagnosis, at face value, and you took your power into your own hands. And I think that's something, we need to hear more and more examples of, because there is a lot of power and a lot of knowledge that we can acquire for ourselves. And I love that you knew your body better and you did something about it. So I would love to just give a quick breakdown of what your earliest baking memory was. And I wonder if this was something you enjoyed doing beforehand, or if this was kind of born out of necessity, you becoming a baker.
Yeah, so I've always been a baker. I've loved being in the kitchen. My earliest memories of baking are baking with my mom growing up. We would make the Nestle Toll House chocolate chip cookie recipe that's on the back of the chocolate chip bag. We would make that every Sunday growing up, and I always remember my mom would put the 2 sticks of butter out on the counter a couple hours before we started baking. Then she'd get her big KitchenAid stand mixer out, and we would make the dough together. And she always let me eat a little bit of the cookie dough, which I loved. And we would bake these cookies together. And something that I always remember is that the recipe calls for 2 cups of chocolate chips, but my mom would always say, just dump the whole bag in. Dump the entire bag of chocolate chips in. It's the best part. So I've been a lifelong baker, and I have just such fond memories of baking growing up.
Oh, that's beautiful. And literally, you just took me back, because everyone would make the cookie recipe off of the back of that bag. And the minute you said it, I could taste the cookie. Like, I could literally remember what that recipe tastes like. It's it's really amazing, the power of like nostalgia and treats, and like time spent with family making these treats or enjoying these treats together. That part of your story really got me, because there are people that could care less about sweets. Maybe they're more of like a salty person, and I feel like they don't really have the same attachment to sharing like a snack or a meal in the same way that someone that loves sweets does. But to then kind of find out later in life that you have to absolutely not touch any sweet you've ever had before, because the ingredients were leading you to have a health diagnosis that was keeping you from doing something you loved very much and were, you know, doing your whole life, which was being an athlete. So you were a D1 athlete, soccer player. You graduated, you decided you were going to start doing some long distance running, training for, was it a marathon or a half marathon?
It was a half marathon first.
And then you just realized you were having, I guess, was it neuropathy, numbness, like just really odd for how young you were, 22 at the time. Could you tell us a little bit about that time frame, and just like, it had to be really concerning because you are so young and you were always using your body as an athlete. So what was that time like for you, and just trying to figure out what was going on?
Sure. So I have been an athlete my whole life. I grew up playing soccer, basketball, and I ran track. And I was very fortunate enough to be able to play at the Division 1 level, and equally as fortunate to really never have an injury. I mean, I had sprained ankles, but I was never really sidelined for any period of time. So considered myself, pretty healthy, and just very lucky that I was able to always play the sports that I loved. When I graduated from the University of Maine, immediately I knew that I wanted to get into distance running. It had been a goal of mine to someday run a marathon. So I said, why don't I train and run a half marathon? If that goes well, then I'll work my way up to, 26.2 miles. So this was in May of 2016, right after I graduated college, immediately started training for a half marathon. And again, never really having an injury in my life, it was quite shocking what happened. So a few miles into my run, I would start to get this really sharp shooting pain down the back of my legs. And it almost was like a switch went off. And it was like suddenly, like 1 minute I was fine, and the next minute was this sharp shooting pain. And then if I continued running, I'd start to get a tingly feeling in my feet, almost like your foot is falling asleep. And the tingly feeling would work its way all the way up my legs. And if I continued to run, my legs would be completely numb. And I just remember thinking, why is this happening? I've been an athlete my entire life. I've never experienced anything like this. And there was almost no information on the internet. I was trying to figure out, why is this happening, and tried to solve things holistically, by myself, like, oh, my shoes must be tied too tight, because it's cutting off the feeling, and, or maybe I should wear those compression socks. Maybe it's, maybe that's the issue. So I tried both those things, and then I thought, maybe my legs are just really tight. I need to do some yoga and some stretching. And so I tried all these different things. I even went to physical therapy. Nothing worked. And so I went to see a sports specialist doctor, and he said, you have compartment syndrome. And I'd actually heard about this because a couple of girls in my college soccer team had compartment syndrome, and also my college soccer coach had compartment syndrome, it's very, very rare. So the fact that I had seen it before,
Yeah.
it shows up, slightly different in different people. But basically, my doctor said, you have compartment syndrome. The muscle fibers that surround the muscles in your legs, they're supposed to expand when you run, right? Your muscles get swollen, there's extra blood flow, the muscles are working really hard to expand, so the muscle fibers expand with them. In your body, those muscle fibers never expand. So your muscles are trying to expand, and it's bumping up against those fibers. That's that sharp shooting pain that you feel. And then when the blood flow can't get there, you lose feeling. So he said you have two choices. You're doing really bad nerve damage to your legs, and it's permanent damage you're doing. So you cannot continue to run. So you can either quit running altogether, or you can get surgery on both of your legs. And what he said, the surgery is called a fasciotomy, and they go in and they make little incisions in those muscle fibers to allow them to expand. And he said, we've done this before, and there's no guarantee that it even solves the issue. So I said, why would I go through surgery if there's no guarantee that this works? I thought I was a very healthy 22-year-old, just graduated, being a D1 athlete. There's no reason that this adds up. So I kind of went back to the drawing board and thought there has to be another way. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue running. I don't care if I'm doing damage. I just love to run and want to run. So I was training for this half marathon with my aunt, who lives in my hometown in Maine, and she's run multiple marathons. And she said, I'm gluten-free and I feel amazing, and it really helps me when I'm training. Maybe you should try to be gluten-free. And I thought, well, that has nothing to do with why my legs are going numb, but I'm so desperate to feel better, whatever, I'll give it a shot. So that weekend we had a family birthday party at my aunt's house, and she made the most insane chocolate cake. And I'm not a huge cake person, but this was like the best chocolate cake I've ever had. And after I finished eating it, she said, I didn't want to tell you, but the cake is gluten-free. So here's your proof you can do it. This was on a Saturday, and I said, okay, Monday morning, I'm starting. And I just completely cut out gluten. I literally went from eating fast food every week to reading every nutrition label. And I was absolutely horrified at what goes into our food. So Monday morning, I become gluten-free, and within 3 days, I could run normally again. I had all feeling, and it was such a powerful sensation to be able to run again. And I thought, I'm never going to complain about running ever again, because now I can run. It feels good, and I just solved this big health issue. So that's why I became gluten-free.
Oh, I love it. And I love that it was not only a lifestyle change, but a mindset shift, because you recognized the power of like your own decision making, and like, your body best. And I love that someone you trust kind of was like, come on. And then the proof is in the pudding, right? Or in the chocolate cake. Like, you ate it and you're like, okay, I'm not going to miss out. Like this, if you have a sweet tooth and you're a person that has to reduce something, whether it's sugar or gluten or soy, which is in freaking everything, you really recognize how much you can't have. And going out to restaurants or going to birthday parties, as you said, like I haven't had a birthday cake at someone's birthday in like maybe 7 years. Like I have to, make myself a little treat for home when I get home later to be like, well, here's my snack for the night. Like it's you don't recognize what a huge lifestyle change it is and how much of a mindset shift it is, because it's one thing to say you're going to be gluten free, it's another thing to stick to it. And like any kind of lifestyle change, especially one attached to food, it does often take that shocking thing where you're like, what? No way. Okay, if I cut gluten and I feel this great in 3 days, like how am I going to repair my body after a lifetime? So it's beautiful that you kind of explain both sides of that, because when it does happen, it is shocking, and you are really like at the bedrock of being like, okay, well, how do I eat to survive, let alone enjoy food now? Because gluten is in everything. Tell us about what those first few days, weeks, months were like in going gluten free, and kind of recognizing like the sheer lack of any good options, let alone healthy ones.
It was definitely a mindset shift, like you said, and I did some research before I jumped into it and realized gluten is in so much, and it's in a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily suspect, like soy sauce. No idea why there's wheat in soy sauce, but there is. So anything that contains soy sauce is now off limits. But what I did was I went to the grocery store like the day before I started, and I did a big grocery haul, and I read every ingredient label just to make sure that there was no hidden gluten. And I really leaned into foods that are naturally gluten free. So I've always been a huge lover of fruit. So all fruit is on limits. You can have any type of fruit. And then I also leaned into foods that I've always loved that, just don't have gluten. So meat doesn't have gluten, peanut butter. So I started with a pretty basic diet of meat, fruit, and chocolate. The good thing is a lot of ice cream doesn't have gluten as long as the additives in ice cream don't have gluten. So you can't have cookie dough, but you can have chocolate ice cream. So I was still able to get my dessert fix. But I remember within the first couple of weeks, I was already thinking, how do I bake something that's gluten free? And thankfully, I did have the influence of my aunt, and she pointed me in the direction of King Arthur, the baking flour company, and they have the gluten-free brownie mix and the gluten-free cookie mix. And so I wasn't completely deprived, but I then started to look at my mom's old cookbooks and try to make those recipes we made growing up, but gluten-free. So I would just replace the flour with gluten-free flour, and I had my fair share of absolute disasters in the kitchen. I remember it took me so long to do homemade gluten-free brownies. I mean, they were just awful to start. But it was all trial and error, and I'm so thankful that I was able to go through all of that because it really made me a better baker. And it really made me super passionate about what I was baking, and it kind of made me fall in love with baking again because I saw it as this fun, exciting challenge, and it was just it challenged me. It really pushed me, and it forced me to get creative and try things that are a little bit out of the box. So for that, I'm very thankful. And then in terms of going out to restaurants, my family and I love to go out to eat. So there were things that I would just have to ask, do your French fries contain gluten? I mean, you would think, oh, it's just potatoes. No, a lot of restaurants will coat them in a little bit of flour to get them extra crispy. So some of my favorite restaurants in my hometown, I could no longer get the dish that I loved. There was one place that did a really delicious buffalo chicken dip, and I remember I ordered that one time soon after becoming gluten free, and I totally forgot that they put like a little bit of breadcrumbs on top, and I was like, oh no, I can't eat that anymore. So it was a lot of trial and error, and I will say, today in 2024, it is so much easier to be gluten free than it was 8 years ago. But I'm almost happy about the fact that in 2016 I was forced to get really creative and really read all of the ingredient labels.
It's funny, we had this gluten-free life start at the same time. 2016 was when I just got violently ill after eating a slice of pizza, and then anytime I ate gluten after that again, I literally could not do it. And then later realized soy was also on the table. Gluten was one thing, it was easy to avoid, but soy, I had to become almost a chemist to figure out like where soy was used as an additive. Is it in an ingredient in like a breakdown method within like the process? And in discovering that, you also recognize the food chain and what a lot of ingredients and, things that we're used to eating like fast food, how much of that actually is food and not chemical. And it was really eye opening for me, at least, to I had no cooking skills, zero baking skills still to this day. But since 2016, it's at least forced me to be very grateful for the things that I can eat naturally, as you said, that are safe. There are always tons of go tos. But I think along with the mindset shift, there was having to find that one treat. Ice cream was it for me as well. I lived in Philadelphia at the time, so there was a gelato like place on every corner. They didn't use wheat for anything. But I think for could you give advice to someone who's recently discovered that they have to cut out a major ingredient or food group or something of that sort due to a health condition that's really struggling just with the overwhelm of trying to figure out how do I how do I do food now? How does this work?
I would say do your research, but also try to, like I did, lean into foods that are naturally gluten-free or dairy-free or, whatever the allergy is. There's so many foods out there that you can eat safely, depending on your allergy, but, fruits and veggies, and there's a lot of things that you're probably already eating that you can still continue to eat. So it's not like you're having to find a new breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert all at once. So find things that work for you and then lean into those. So, for instance, if you're now gluten and dairy free, you're like, okay, well, I know that bananas and peanut butter, I can have those. So a banana with peanut butter is a great snack. And then what about a banana with peanut butter on a rice cake? Or, what about banana and peanut butter and a little bit of dark chocolate sprinkled on top? Granted it's dairy free. So just really leaning into things that will naturally fit into your life and already work. So that way you don't feel like you're completely starting from scratch. Because I do remember it can seem very daunting at first, thinking, my whole life is going to be different and I can't eat anything that I used to. That's not necessarily true. So kind of take inventory of what in your fridge and pantry can you eat, keep those, and then, toss everything else. So just lean into things that you know are safe to eat, and then do your research and try to think of it as a fun experiment. I get to now make all these different recipes and try all these new foods, and maybe I'm gonna find like a new favorite dinner or a new favorite dessert, and try to think of it as a fun and exciting thing and not necessarily as a complete loss.
I love that. It's important to make it fun and try to gamify it a little bit. I wonder, since you were running and doing so much long distance at the time, you're relying heavy on carbs, calories, like you get to spoil yourself a little bit after a long run. Was this where you kind of began perfecting your gluten-free version of your mother's recipes and really just having them be that purposeful treat after, training all day or all week long? And kind of how did that morph into others? I'm assuming trying your gluten-free treats?
Yes. So I was baking a lot even from the beginning, and I became gluten free while I was training for this half marathon. So the two kind of went hand in hand. In terms of carbs, because I couldn't eat bread or regular pasta. I mean, gluten free pasta is amazing. Nobody can ever tell the difference. But I've also never been a huge bread or pasta fan, and I think that's because my body subconsciously knew that it didn't work for me. So even in college when I was playing a lot of soccer, I mean, I've never been a huge carb lover. Again, I think because I knew that I wouldn't feel great after. So when it came to training for my full marathon that I did right after the half marathon, I turned to sweet potatoes. So I was eating sweet potatoes, twice a day. I love sweet potatoes. So I was roasting them, I was baking them, I was baking them into, sweet potato brownies or sweet potato muffins. So I was able to get the carbs that I needed,
Mm-hmm.
without turning to traditional carb sources like bread and pasta. The other thing is there's natural carbs in things like a banana. So, turning to natural sources of carbs, and I still prefer to eat my carbs that way. But yes, in terms of baking, I've always eaten dessert. I cannot go to sleep at night unless I have something chocolatey or some sort of dessert. So it was never a question of, can I eat dessert again? It was, how do I eat dessert again? So again, I
Mm-hmm.
had the ice cream in the beginning, and that was fun because I've always been a huge fan of ice cream. But um, I was able to figure out through trial and error the cookies and the brownies, and I knew it wouldn't be perfect to start, but I was just excited that I could have some semblance of those desserts that I grew up loving. So again, it was a transition, but I tried to view it as this isn't a total loss because I'm able to run again and I'm able to feel really great. So growing up and even through college, I would get like 1 to 2 really bad headaches every week to the point where I'm taking medicine and I just don't feel great. And growing up, I would always tell my mom, I need Advil, I need ibuprofen, I don't feel great. And she'd always say, you haven't drank enough water today, you're dehydrated, you probably haven't eaten enough protein, or you're working really hard in sports, your body's just exhausted. And we never really thought it was gluten because when I was growing up, gluten free wasn't, I mean, nobody was gluten free. It was not ever talked about. So it was not really something that was top of mind for us. So I always thought, I'm dehydrated, haven't had enough protein, I've worked too hard, I'm too tired. There's always an excuse that I could put it back on.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I became gluten free, I stopped getting headaches. I'm not even kidding you, maybe one headache a year now. Like, I never, ever, ever get headaches. And it was debilitating. And,
Mm-hmm.
I've had other symptoms clear up. So for me, if I couldn't eat a cookie every night, but I was able to live normally and feel a lot better, that trade-off was so worth it.
Mm-hmm. It when it comes down to the end of the road and like your health and feeling good, it is easy to put it down. And I do remember for me when I just had gastrointestinal issues for the gluten, and the soy would give me like blisters on my skin if I ate it within like an hour. It was like wild. And in slowly recognizing, like, oops, can't eat that. I'm going to have to suffer now for 3 days with like a debilitating stomach pain, but still go to work, still have to live my life, still, just feeling super ill and not really understanding that, oh, cross contamination is an issue, and learning on the fly how to avoid getting sicker from things that you've eaten your whole entire life can be very, as you said, debilitating, but in a way, very empowering. It does give you the satisfaction when you figure out, like, as you said, your headaches went away. My stomach aches got lesser and lesser and lesser to the point of being able to wake up one morning and not already have a stomach pain because of something I ate the night before. That freedom alone of just the understanding and the learning, like, oh, okay, I'm cracking the code. This is getting better. I'm on the right path. I'm going to keep going. But then you almost kind of had like a little cheat code on hand because you still figured out how to make the most decadent, delicious looking cookies and brownie I have ever laid my eyes on. And I am a dessert freak. I love, before my gluten free problems, any bakery I passed by, I ate at. Okay. I love snacks. You're, it I can't even fathom that I can eat your cookies and brownies because they don't look like the typical gluten-free, soy-free, all allergen-free dessert. And that's mainly where my mind is like the most boggled because I look at your product and then I read what isn't in it. And I am blown away that it doesn't look like a cardboard biscuit wafer of some sort that I just have to chew and just pretend tastes good.
Right.
Like, how in the heck, don't give any trade secrets away, but how in the heck did you achieve this? And please tell everyone what isn't in your products. Let's just start there because they're the bedrock of traditional baking. And you have like nailed the code. You invented the code, cracked it, nailed it all over again, reinvented it. Like, please tell us how you went about doing this because I'm personally flabbergasted.